221,250,127. That is how many people Nigeria's own National Population Commission says lived in Nigeria in 2023. 227,882,945. That is how many the United Nations and the World Bank say live there. The same country, the same year, a gap of 6.5 million people, about the population of Denmark, sitting between two official numbers, and nobody can tell you which one is wrong. Here is why nobody can. Neither of those numbers is a count. Nigeria's last completed census was in March 2006. Before that, 1991. Before that, a census was taken in 1973, announced, and then canceled, the result thrown away. The census scheduled for May 2023 was called off days before it was due to begin, and no new date has been set. So the largest country in Africa, the sixth largest on Earth, has not counted itself in 20 years. Everything you have ever read about how many Nigerians there are is a projection built on a projection. There are two questions here, and only one of them is about arithmetic. The first is mechanical. How does a modern state, with an army, a tax service, a central bank, mobile phone networks covering almost everyone, end up not knowing how many people are inside it, to the nearest 6 million? That one has a clean answer, and we will get to it. The second question is the one that will still be sitting there when this video ends. Nigeria has tried to count itself many times. It has the money to do it. The 2023 census was budgeted and staffed and dated. And every time, at the last moment, it doesn't happen, or it happens and the result is thrown out. So, why does one of the most consequential numbers in the world keep failing to exist? Not why is it hard. Why does it keep being stopped? Hold that. Because the answer, when it arrives, is not about demography at all. It is about the fact that in Nigeria, being counted is not a measurement. It is a payment. Start with what a census is supposed to be. For 1 week, a state stops estimating and starts counting. Enumerators walk every street, knock on every door, and write down who slept there last night. It is the most expensive thing a statistics office ever does, and it is the only number in a country that is not a model. Everything else, unemployment, income per head, how many children need vaccines, how many schools to build, is calculated against it. Get the denominator wrong, and every rate in the country is wrong with it. Nigeria has done this 4 times since independence. 1962, disputed, rerun. 1963, disputed again. 1973, enumerators counted 79.8 million people. General Gowan announced the result, and then in 1975 the next government canceled it outright and dissolved the census board. The figures, they said, have been inflated. 1991, 88.5 million, and the result was not officially handed over for years. 2006, 140 million, and we will come back to that number because it does not survive contact with the rest of this story. And here is the detail that turns a statistical exercise into a fight. In Nigeria, the population of a state determines 2 things: how many seats it gets in the legislature and how much money it receives from the federal account, which is where the country's oil revenue is pooled and shared out. So the census is not a survey. It is the division of the estate. Every state, every local government, every community knows exactly what its own head count is worth in Naira. Now imagine running a neutral count under those conditions. Put yourself at the bottom of that system, because that is where the number is actually made. The enumerator is not a statistician. He is a secondary school teacher or a final year student hired for 2 weeks, given a satchel, a stack of forms, and a wax crayon to mark the door frames he has finished. He is paid a stipend that matters to him. He is assigned an enumeration area drawn on a map that may be 10 years old. There is a training session. There is a supervisor somewhere with a phone. And then he walks. In a planned district, this is tedious and possible. In most of the country, it is neither, because the addresses do not exist in the form the map assumes. Compounds sit behind compounds. A household is not one family. It can be 3 generations, plus a brother's wife, plus 2 apprentices who sleep in the shop. The man who owns the compound may be at a market 40 kilometers away for the week. Somebody's husband is a trader who is in Cotonou this month and in Kano next month. And both places want to count him because both places are paid for him. Just write what you see. The enumerator tells himself, walking the 3rd street of the morning. Write what you see and let them argue about it upstairs. That is exactly what happens. They argue about it upstairs. And the number he wrote, honest, careful, and unavoidably incomplete, becomes the thing that 36 state governments will fight over for the next 15 years. Now stack the obstacles, because each one is solvable and each solution creates the next problem. First, the map. You cannot count a country you have not drawn. Before enumeration, you need a complete frame of enumeration areas. Every settlement, every new suburb that appeared since the last time. Nigeria's cities have grown faster than almost anywhere in human history. In 1960, 14% of Nigerians lived in a town. Today, it is 63%, and 146 million people live in urban areas. That is more city dwellers than Russia has people added to a map that was mostly drawn for a rural country. Second, the birth record. In most countries, a census can be checked against registration data, births, deaths, addresses. In Nigeria, by the last World Bank figure, fewer than half of children under 5 have their births registered, 42.6% in 2018. So more than half of a generation enters the world without an entry anywhere. You cannot audit a count against a register that does not contain them. Third, security. Parts of the Northeast have spent 15 years under an insurgency that displaced millions. You cannot send a 19-year-old with a satchel to knock on doors there, and the people who fled are now somewhere else, being counted, or not, by someone else. Fourth, and this is the one that kills the whole thing, the incentive. Every additional person counted in your state is more federal money and, at the margin, more political weight. Not one actor in the chain is neutral. Not the state governor, not the local government chairman, not the community leader who knows what his ward's numbers are worth. Fifth, the appeal. Because everyone knows the incentive exists, everyone knows everyone else has it too. So when the result comes out, the losing states do not accept it. They cannot afford to, whether or not it is accurate. And that is the trap. A census in Nigeria does not end an argument. It starts one with the full weight of the federal budget behind it, which is why the most important thing to understand about Nigeria's missing number is that it is not missing by accident, and it is not missing because Nigerians cannot count. It is missing because the count would have to be accepted, and acceptance is the part nobody has ever managed to build. Try it from the inside for a second, because it is easy to hear all this as somebody else's dysfunction. Imagine your town's share of the national budget. The money for its clinics, its roads, its teachers' salaries is set by how many people the government believes live there. Not how many actually live there. How many it believes. Now imagine a young man arrives at your door with a clipboard, and everyone on your street knows that the neighboring town is doing everything it can to be counted generously. What is the honest thing to do? And what is the thing you would actually do? You would make sure your household was counted fully. You would count the sons who were away working. You would be very sure the enumerator did not miss the compound at the back. None of that is fraud. All of it is rational. And multiply that by 40 million households, and there is no conspiracy anywhere in the system. No smoke-filled room, no forged ledger, and the number still comes out wrong, and everybody still knows it came out wrong. That is the shape of this problem. It is not corruption doing the damage. It is arithmetic that pays people to be optimistic in a country where 4 in 10 people are under 15 years old, and the whole thing is growing under the counter's feet while they work. Here is the first chart, and it is the simplest one this channel has ever put on screen. Nigeria's population, as the world records it from 1960 to today. 45 million people at independence. 233 million now. A line that never bends. And every point on it after 2006 is a model, not a count. Watch what the model has to do. It takes the last accepted census, adds an assumed birth rate, subtracts an assumed death rate, adjusts for assumed migration, and carries that forward 1 year at a time. So a small error in the assumption compounds quietly every year for 20 years. That is how you get two official figures 6.5 million apart with neither side doing anything dishonest. They're running the same kind of machine from slightly different settings. And the consequences are not academic. Nigeria's income per head is this line divided into the size of the economy. In 2014, that came to about $3,089 a person. In 2024, measured in dollars, it is $1,084. Most of that fall is the naira losing value against the dollar rather than Nigerians producing less. But the denominator is doing work in it too, and the denominator is a guess. Life expectancy, child mortality, vaccine coverage, how many teachers are needed, how much rice the country must import. All of them are rates. All of them are this number on the bottom of fraction. Which brings us to 2023 and the census that was going to end all of this. It was real. It had a date, the 3rd to the 7th of May. It had a commission of budget trainers, enumerators recruited and paid, tablets bought for digital capture. It was by some distance the most prepared census Nigeria had ever assembled. The first one designed to be taken electronically, so that the count could be transmitted rather than carried up a chain of offices where numbers had gone missing before. And on the 28th of April, 5 days before enumeration was due to begin, President Muhammadu Buhari postponed it. The announcement came from the information minister. The commission called it a reschedule. Buhari had 1 month left in office. His successor would decide. 2 years later, in April 2025, President Tinubu inaugurated a fresh committee to plan a census and gave it 3 weeks to report. No enumeration date has followed. Twice in 2025, the Population Commission had to publicly deny reports that a census was about to happen. Look at the pattern, because it is the same shape every time, and it is the answer to our second question, arriving early. 1973. Counted, canceled by the incoming government. 1991. Counted, results withheld. 2006. Counted, contested for a decade. 2023. Canceled before a single door was knocked by an outgoing president, 5 days out. No census in Nigeria has ever been conducted by a government that would still be in office to live with the result. Now, the part that should not be possible. Go back to 2006, the last completed census, the foundation stone under every Nigerian population figure in the world today. The official Gazette records the final result as 140,003,542. Nigeria's own National Bureau of Statistics, in its demographic bulletin, records the same census as 140,431,790. 428,000 people between two publications of the same government describing the same count. That is not a rounding difference. That is a small city. And it gets stranger because the census is not the number the world uses. The World Bank series, the one every institution quotes, built on United Nations estimates, puts Nigeria's population in 2006 at 149 million, 9 million above the census. Do the same test on 1991. The census counted 88.5 million. The World Bank series for 1991 says 99.7 million, 11 million above the count. So the pattern is consistent. Every time Nigeria has actually counted, the count came in far below the estimate the world had already decided on, and rather than correcting the estimate, the world adjusted the count upward and kept going. Somebody, at some point, decided the census was the thing that was wrong. That might even be correct. Undercounting is real. Enumerators do miss compounds. But notice what it means. The most quoted population figure for the 6th largest country on Earth are not built on Nigeria's measurements. They are built on a model that overrode them. And then there is Lagos, where the whole argument stops being abstract. In the 2006 census, The federal count gave Lagos State 9,113,605 people. Lagos State did not accept it. It had run its own parallel enumeration, collecting household forms itself, and it announced its own figure, 17,553,924. Nearly double. The governor at the time, Bola Tinubu, the man who is president of Nigeria today, publicly rejected the federal number and demanded a recount. In 2013, a census tribunal ruled on 19 petitions and nullified the federal figures for 14 of Lagos State's 20 local government areas and cited the state's own projection. Now, bring it to the present. The National Bureau of Statistics projects Lagos at 13,710,000 for 2023. The World Bank's own diagnostic study of Lagos, published the same year, notes that the Federal Statistics Office's most recent estimate was 12.8 million, while the Lagos State Bureau of Statistics puts the city at 26.4 million. That is not a disagreement about a decimal. One arm of government thinks a city has 13 million people in it, and another arm of the same government thinks it has 26 million. Somewhere between those two numbers is a population the size of Australia that either exists or doesn't. And every road plan, every water system, every school budget, every business case for a factory is drawn against one of the two. Here is the deepest part of this, and it is not in Nigeria at all. It is in every projection the rest of the world has built on top of Nigeria's missing number. For years, you could not read an article about global population without the line, by 2050, Nigeria will have overtaken the United States. It came from the United Nations. In its 2022 projections, the UN's own chart of the 10 most populous countries in 2050 show Nigeria and the United States level at 375 million each. Then the UN revised. In the 2024 projections, Nigeria's numbers came down. The UN's own summary now says Pakistan and eventually Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of the Congo will overtake the United States, with that word, eventually, doing a great deal of work. Its country table gives Nigeria 374 million people in 2054, for years later than the year everyone had been quoting. And why did the projection move? Because the UN revised its estimate of Nigerian fertility downward, using a household survey. Not a census, a survey. Look at this chart. Nigerian women were having 6.4 children each in 1960, 6.5 in 1990. It went up before it came down, and 4.4 today against a world average of 2.2. That decline is the single most consequential trend line on the planet for the next century, and it is measured by sampling a few thousand households, because the instrument that would measure it properly has not been used since 2006. So the world's demographic future rests on a number that Nigeria has not verified in 20 years, that two arms of its own government disagree about by 6 million, and that its own former statistics chief once dismissed in one sentence. Festus Odemegwu ran the National Population Commission. His verdict: these figures are just guesstimates. Nobody knows whether the population is 120 million, 150 million, 200 million. No Nigerian, not the NPC, the UN, the World Bank. So, the question we left open: why does the count keep being stopped? Not because it is difficult, though it is. Because of what it would settle. A census in Nigeria does not produce a fact. It produces a distribution of federal revenue, of legislative seats, of which regions are large and therefore which are owed. And once it is published, that distribution is fixed for a decade against every state that lost. Which means that the moment before a census is announced is the last moment at which everybody can still believe their own number. That is a genuinely comfortable place to be, and no government has yet been willing to leave it, least of all one that will be out of office before the arguing starts. Meanwhile, the projections keep printing. 233 million, or 221, or 238, depending on which office you ask. 374 million by the middle of the century, from a model built on a count taken in 2006, corrected by a survey. And every one of those numbers will be reported as a fact, because the alternative, writing that nobody knows, does not fit in a headline. There is nothing uniquely Nigerian in this, by the way. Every country's statistics are a negotiation between what is measured and what is convenient. Nigeria's case is only the largest and clearest example of what happens when the number decides the money. Count the people, and you have to divide the estate. Don't count them, and everyone gets to keep the version they prefer.